So tonight's presentation is called Preparing Your Family for the Next Chapter, Why Planning Ahead Reduces Stress for the People That You Love. Now, this is not a presentation about money, investment performance, or estate documents. It's about people. Specifically, it's about what families experience when they suddenly ask to step into a role that they've never been prepared for. Now, most people don't avoid these conversations because they don't care. They avoid them because they don't want to make things uncomfortable, emotional, or complicated. And my goal today is to do just the opposite. It's to make this topic feel calm, practical, and manageable. Now, nothing that we talk about today is going to require action, any types of decisions or disclosure of any type of information. These family meetings are an opportunity to understand why preparation matters and what it can look like when it's done thoughtfully. Now, whether you're a parent, an adult child, or both, I want you to know this. This conversation is about reducing stress, not creating it. So with that in mind, let's start with why this matters in the first place. Now, most families don't struggle with money or because of money. They struggle because no one prepared them. Documents are important, but they don't explain the process or reduce the stress in the moment. Preparation is simply a way to make a difficult time easier for the people that you love. Now, I want to be clear about what family generation or family planning conversations are not. Because when people hear family planning, estate planning, it's easy to assume things that aren't true. And I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable or guarded. This is not about inheritance amounts. We're not talking about numbers at these meetings or percentages or who gets what. These details are personal and they're not required for family conversations. Many families never discuss the specific dollar amounts, and that's perfectly okay. Second, it's not about urgency or making decisions. Nothing needs to be decided before these meetings. There are no deadlines, there's no forms to sign, and there's no pressure to take any type of action. It's all about preparation and not reaction. It's not about giving up control. Parents remain fully in control. They remain in control of the process, the pace, and what information is shared. In fact, preparation actually helps people maintain control, even when life changes unexpectedly. Finally, this is not about pressuring your adult children. It's not about placing responsibility on them or creating expectations. Most adult children don't want control. They want clarity. They want to know who to call, what to expect, and frankly, avoid making mistakes. So when we talk about family planning in this context, we're really talking about one thing, and that's making a difficult time easier and easier for the people that you care about. I think once families understand what these meetings are not, it becomes much easier to see what preparation actually looks like. Now, at the end of the day, the entire conversation comes down to one simple idea, and it's about reducing stress for your family. Most families don't realize how overwhelming this can be for the people that are left behind. Even when everything is technically in order, adult children are often dealing with grief, time pressure, and uncertainty, and all at once. They're asking questions like, where do I start? Who do I call first? Am I doing this right? What if I make a mistake? The stress doesn't come from the money. It comes from not knowing the process, not knowing who to trust, and not knowing what's expected of them. Now, preparation doesn't remove the emotion of loss, and it really shouldn't. But it can remove the unnecessary confusion, second guessing, and panic. When families plan ahead, they're not trying to control the future. They're simply making sure the people they love aren't left figuring everything out on their own. And that's why we approach this as a family conversation. Conversation's the key. It's not a transaction, it's not a checklist, and it's not a one-time event. It's about clarity, it's about support, and it's about reducing the fear and stress of the unknown for everyone involved. So let's talk about what preparation actually looks like when it's well done. Now, when families haven't had this conversation in advance, the challenges that they face are surprisingly consistent. It doesn't matter how well educated, how well organized, or how well intentioned the family is. One of the most common issues is that important documents are scattered or missing. Some are with the attorney, some are in a file drawer, some are online, some are in a safety deposit box. Now, there's nothing wrong with having these documents in different locations. In fact, some of them do belong in different locations. But the family members just don't always know where to look. Another common issue is that children aren't sure who to call. They may not know which advisor, attorney, or insurance company is involved. We also see an awful lot of tax mistakes on inherited accounts, especially on the inherited IRAs. These aren't intentional mistakes. They happen because the rules are complex, and decisions often have to be made before people really feel ready to make those decisions. These are emotional decisions that are often made too quickly. Grief and urgency just don't mix well. People often feel pressure to do something even when waiting would have been a better option. And finally, there's conflict caused by confusion. It's not because family members are being unreasonable, but it's because expectations weren't clear and communications do break down under stress. What's important is to understand this. These issues are not caused by bad planning. They're caused by the lack of preparation and communication that happens after the planning is done. Now, this leads to an important reframe that most families don't consider. Even well-designed estate plans can fail. They can fail because families are not prepared. Most people assume that once the documents are signed that the planning's done. But documents don't explain the process and they don't reduce down the stress in the moment. Estate plans are legal tools. Preparation is a human process. A will or trust tells you what should happen. It doesn't tell you or your family how things unfold, who to call first, or what decisions actually need to be made. Now, when families aren't prepared, even a perfectly drafted plan can feel overwhelming. And when mistakes are made and delays are made, frustration tends to show up. Preparation doesn't replace legal planning, it complements it. It helps everyone understand the intent behind the plan, the steps involved, and the support that's available. That's why we separate the idea of having documents from preparing people who will one day need to use them. So if documents alone aren't enough, the next question becomes, what does the preparation actually look like? Well, first of all, it's important that everyone understands the process. They don't have to understand every detail, but the big picture. People know what typically happens, in what order, and what their role might be. Second, documents are accessible. They're not scattered, they're not locked away, and they're not dependent on one person remembering where everything is. Families know where the important information lives and how to access it when it is needed. Third, the roles are clear. Who's the primary contact? Who helps coordinate? Who makes which decisions, and which decisions need to be made quickly, and which decisions can wait till later? Clarity helps reduce confusion, and it prevents conflict within the family. And finally, financial support is already in place. Families aren't scrambling to find help in the middle of an emotional situation. They already know who to call, and they know that that person understands the family and understands the plan. When all this is in place, preparation doesn't feel overwhelming. In fact, it feels steady. And that leads us to one important distinction. This is about clarity, and it's not about control. Preparation doesn't mean sharing everything or giving up the decision-making. It means creating understanding so no one is left guessing when it matters most. With this in mind, let's walk through the 4 pillars that support this kind of preparation. Up to this point, we've talked about why preparation matters and what tends to go wrong when families aren't prepared. Now let's shift gears slightly and give a simple way to think about the preparation when it's done well. We think about intergenerational planning through 4 pillars, not as a checklist, not as a one-time event, but as a framework that families come back to over time. What I want to emphasize right away is this. These pillars are not complicated and they're not overwhelming. They're practical and they're designed to reduce stress, not create more work. Some families focus on one pillar more than another. Some take this step by step. Some want to look at all the pillars at once. Sometimes those that take it step by step, it may take months or even years to put everything in place. There is no right pace and no expectation that everything has to happen at once. Together, these 4 pillars help families answer some essential questions. How does the process work? Where is everything? Who helps us through this? And how do we avoid making unnecessary mistakes? Now, as we walk through each pillar, keep this in mind. This is about understanding, not committing to anything. With that, let's take a look at that first pillar. That first pillar is what we call estate clarity. When families are prepared, they have a clear understanding of how assets are transferred, at least from a high level. They don't need to know the legal detail, the fine print. They just need to know the overall flow of things. People understand things like what happens first, what can happen later, which assets move through a will or through a trust, and which do not. This clarity matters because most stress comes from uncertainty. When families don't know how things work, every step feels like a potential mistake. Estate clarity also means a visual explanation of the estate plan. Instead of relying on legal language, families can see how assets are intended to move. That alone removes a tremendous amount of confusion. What the legal document tells you in legalese, a flow chart of how things are going to move and what has to happen when it happens to happen, creates a lot better understanding of the entire process. And this alone can remove a lot of confusion. And when people understand the plan, there are few surprises for the heirs. The surprises usually are not about money. They're about expectations that were never aligned. Estate clarity doesn't mean that you have to share everything. It means sharing enough information so people are not left guessing. And when clarity is in place, families are able to move through the process with confidence, and they don't need to second guess. Now, the second pillar is document and life organization. Once families understand how things are supposed to work, the next question is a very practical one. Where does everything live? This pillar is about having one secure place for important information. Now, the key word there is information. I didn't say one place for all the documents. One place as a source of the important information. And that this information isn't scattered across file cabinets, email inboxes, portals, safe deposit boxes, online, or as I said before, in people's memories. It's one place that families can go. It also means clear access for the loved ones, and not necessarily today, but when that access is actually needed later on. That way, family members aren't scrambling, trying to guess passwords, figure out what websites things are located on, or whether they're even allowed to look into something. When documents and information are organized this way, there's far less scrambling during a crisis. Now, people focus on what matters in this case instead of searching for the paperwork. Now, I know some of you on this call attended a webinar we did about 2 years ago. I think it was back in 2024. And that session focused on the challenge of organizing documents, contacts, key information in a way that's usable and not just stored. Now, based on the work that we did, feedback from people that attended that webinar, we created a document and life organizer. And a number of our clients are already implementing that. The feedback has been pretty consistent. Although it takes some time and some thought to complete it, they don't feel overwhelmed. In fact, as they move through the process, they feel relieved. And that's really the point. This isn't about perfection or having everything done. But this is a book which can be grabbed by an executor or an agent that's under your power of attorney, and they can take this book and have a roadmap of what they need to do, who they need to call, and where they can find the important information that they're going to need to move forward. It's about creating enough structure so that people you care about aren't left guessing. Now, when this pillar is in place, we find this is probably one of the two most important pillars because families gain confidence in knowing that there's a effective plan, a place that they can go and start the process. They know where to go, they know where to look for, and they know who can help them. Now, once the information is organized and accessible, the next area that families often struggle with is understanding the tax side of the inherited assets. And this third pillar we call tax awareness. This is an area where families often have the best intentions and they still make costly mistakes. And it's not because they're careless, but because the rules are really complex and timing matters. One of the most common issues we see are with inherited IRAs. The rules around inherited retirement accounts have changed. In fact, since 2020, not only have the rules changed 3 or 4 times, but the interpretation of the rules that we operated under for a couple of years changed. And these rules and these laws are not intuitive. They don't always make sense. Now, decisions that can seem simple can have very long-term tax consequences if they're made without guidance. We also see confusion around capital gains and step-up basis. There are some assets that receive favorable tax treatment at death. Others don't. And understanding this difference can significantly affect outcomes. And this is where timing really matters. What income is recognized? When assets are sold? When should distributions be taken? All of this can change the tax result. Waiting too long or acting too quickly can each have its consequences, and it's important to understand this. Most tax decisions most tax mistakes are not made by bad decisions. They're caused by decisions that are made without enough information and are often made under stress. Tax awareness doesn't mean that families need to be tax experts. It means they need to know enough to pause, ask questions, and get guidance before acting. Now, when families understand this pillar, they're far less likely to look back and say, I wish I had known that back then. Now, even with clarity, organization, and tax awareness in place, families still need support when emotions are high. And that fourth pillar we call concierge support during settlement. Now, this pillar often surprises people. Many families assume that they already know who will be guiding them when the time comes. And most people think that person is the attorney. And attorneys do play an important role. They handle legal documents, filings, court requirements. But here's the important distinction. An attorney is not designed to be a day-to-day coordinator of everything a family has to deal with after death. Attorneys don't manage cash flow. They generally don't coordinate with custodians, insurance companies, or financial institutions. And when they do, they're usually talking to a home office employee who knows nothing about the family, does not know tax law, doesn't know financial planning, and it looks like we just advanced one there. Sorry about that. They don't know financial planning. And what happens, that's a recipe for financial disaster. Attorneys don't prioritize which decision should happen now versus later. And they're typically not involved in the emotional side of what families are experiencing. What families often need most during settlement is one point of coordination. Someone who understands the full picture, someone who can help them connect the dots between the legal, the financial, the tax, and the administrative tasks. This is especially important because decisions are often made while emotions are high. Grief, fatigue, and time pressure make it easy to get overwhelmed. Concierge support means families aren't left trying to figure out what next. They have guidance, they know who to call, and they know that someone is helping them move through the process at a manageable pace. Now, this support does not replace attorneys and CPAs. It works alongside of them. But when this pillar is in place, families don't feel alone during one of the most difficult transitions that they'll ever face. Together, these 4 pillars move through a difficult transition with clarity, support, and far less stress. So let's kind of briefly explain what a family meeting actually looks like. Now, typically, the meeting includes parents and adult children. Sometimes that's everyone in the same room, but more and more today, because families are spread out, time constraints, Many times now, these meetings are conducted by Zoom. Sometimes we meet, in fact, probably more often than not, we meet with the parents first, and then we bring the adult children in for a future meeting. Now, the focus on these meetings is understanding, not decisions. Okay? These meetings are not a place for decisions to be made. We're not there to make changes, and we're not there to force conversation. We're there to explain the process and answer questions. There is no discussion of any specific numbers. We don't review balances of investment accounts, inheritance amounts, any account values, unless that family specifically wants us to address that. Now, most families at these meetings choose not to do that, and that's completely fine. Now, the pace is set by the family. Some families move quickly. Others take one step at a time over months or even years. And there are no expectations that anything or everything has to happen at once. The goal of the meeting is simple: to make sure that everyone knows what to expect, where to go for information, and who will guide them when the time comes. Families often tell us that having this conversation brings them a sense of relief, not because everything is finished, but because things seem a lot clearer than they were before. So who's the family meeting actually for? Well, first, it's for families who want to reduce stress for their children. Not by doing everything perfectly, but by making sure that the children aren't left trying to figure things out during what will be a very difficult time. It's also for families who value organization and clarity. People who would rather understand how things work ahead of time rather than try to sort it out under pressure later. And it's for families who prefer planning over crisis management. Families who believe it's better to have a calm conversation now rather than a rushed one later. Now, what's important to understand is that this meeting is not reserved for a certain age, a certain net worth, or people in a certain life stage. Some families do this in their 60s or 70s. Others do it much earlier. But what it really is about is mindset. If you believe that preparation is a gift to the next generation, then this type of meeting could be very helpful for your family. And if now is not the right time for those meetings, that's okay too. Getting started is an option. It's not an expectation. Now, just as important as knowing who the meeting is for, it's also understanding what the meeting is not about. First, it's not about pressuring adult children. There are no expectations placed on them, no responsibility assigned, and no roles forced on anyone. Those things happen outside these meetings. This is about support, not pressure. This is not about giving up control. As parents, you remain fully in control of the process. You decide what's shared, when it's shared, and how far the conversation goes. And third, this is not about sharing information before you're ready. There is no requirement to discuss numbers, balances, or specific details. In fact, many families choose not to do that, and that's completely appropriate. Now, what this meeting is about creating understanding of the process, understanding where the information is, and understanding who will help guide them when the time comes. Now, if that feels helpful to you, the option is there for you to reach out to us. We do want to help. But if it doesn't feel right yet, that's okay too. Now, with that in mind, let me explain what the next step is for those who want to continue or at least get started soon with these types of conversations. The first meeting, when we do them, is a short introductory conversation to see whether a family meeting would be useful for the family, and if so, how to start. There's no obligation, there's no preparation required, and there's no decisions that need to be made during the call. Now, on the future screen, you will see a QR code that'll take you directly to my calendar, and you'll also see the web address underneath in case it's easier for you to type that in later. And certainly, if you're reviewing the video, both those items will be available on the video later. Don't need to schedule anything today. You need to take your time, talk with family members, and come back when it feels right. The conversation is available whenever you're ready to start. But my hope is that this brief meeting tonight gave you some clarity, some reassurance, and a better sense of what preparation can look like when it's done thoughtfully. Now, before we wrap up and we answer some of your questions, I want to remind you that we're recording the presentation and we will let you know when it's been posted and how to access it from our website. Also want to let you know about 2 more webinars that we have coming up. In April, we have one on college planning and college search. Now, this is a new service that we're offering, and I think it's kind of unique. It helps 14 to 17-year-olds search for the right school. It helps them negotiate costs, and it tips the odds in their favor of getting into the right school. Or not the right school, but at least the school of their choice, which hopefully is the right school. In June, we're going to be doing a webinar on teaching your kids about money. And this is a webinar for parents. And we will follow up in the summer with summer school presentations geared towards different age groups where we think we can offer some good ideas directly to the kids about saving money in the future. I have Joe Frisora, who's a new advisor in our office. He's going to quickly go through the questions that are there, and there he is, and see what questions are on. So he's about to go.
Can you see me?
Yep, we can see you. So
Okay.
Joe's been with us for, I guess, about 6 months now. He's a recovering engineer, as he describes it. He went to school for electrical engineering and spent the first 7 or 8 years of his career after school in the engineering field before deciding about a year or 2 he wanted to get into financial planning. So, Joe, are there any questions that came in?
We have a few questions. The first one is, what does concierge support during settlement actually mean?
Okay. What we find is during settlement, this kind of support means that families aren't left not wondering where to go, not having to figure out everything on their own at a very emotional point in time. They know they need who to call at first, and they have someone that will coordinate things between the attorney, the CPA. Sometimes you have insurance agents, property and casualty agents involved. And basically, we coordinate all aspects of that, so it's much easier for the family to move through the settlement and the probate process. So we kind of connect all the dots and coordinate all the players so that individuals that are named as executors, or maybe they're agents under a power of attorney, have a hand to guide them through that process.
The next one is, where should a family start if they've never talked about this before?
Well, I think the first place to start is organization. To have start with a family meeting, is like taking a trip where you're packing your bags as you're heading out the door, and then you get to the airport and you're checking to make sure you have a passport. I think getting everything organized, I think using a tool such as our document and organizer book or others that are available to start gathering information, start centralizing that information is probably the first step. And I find that when people start with the organization step, the other steps kind of flow kind of naturally. So it kind of one thing flows into the other, and I find it a very much smoother process. You don't have to lay out the whole process ahead of time. You take one step at a time, and I believe that first step starts with organizing things.
The last question we got was, what if my children aren't ready?
Well, I think kind of ties in with the other question. There's a lot that has to happen even before you get the children involved. And I think, a slow process of getting the kids involved gradually, sharing as you're organizing, sharing the fact that you're doing that. I generally don't find a lot of resistance with the kids, because I think one of the biggest fear that we have as our parents get older is, what's going to happen when they pass? Who's handling things? Where do I go? I think sometimes people siblings get upset when one person is chosen as an executor, and I find the person chosen as the executor would gladly give up that obligation because they know what's ahead of them. And I think when the kids understand that this process will make things a lot easier for them, I think they buy into it. I think a lot of the problem that we have in getting our kids involved, and I'm not alone. Sometimes the shoemakers' kids don't have shoes, but getting the kids involved is less about the kids not wanting to get involved than it is the discomfort of us getting our kids involved and knowing where to start. I think once that process is apparent to us as parents, I think it's much easier to get the kids to buy in. Any other questions come in?
That's all the questions I see.
All righty. Okay, well, we're glad that you all attended. We hope that you found it helpful. We're certainly here to provide additional information and material should you need it. And as I said, we will let you know when the video has been posted to our website, and it's someplace you can go and review tonight's session. And as I said, pause it and take some notes if you need to. And any material that we can help you with, just let us know. I think this is the type of thing that really provides comfort to families, and it eliminates a lot of problems that tend to happen between siblings after the parents are gone. So I hope you have a great night. I hope those of you in New England are enjoying a spring day today. I felt like going out with my T-shirt on today, and we'll see you all soon. Take care and have a good night.
Good night, everybody.